Hello everybody and welcome back to another video for the Russell text called Literature for Children for EDU 552. Today's video is on Chapter 7, Folk Narratives. And the book that I decided to choose this week kind of flips your traditional folk tale, fairy tale on its head and creates a story that is totally different and gives a different twist on what you think you've always known. And that book is The Three Pigs by David Wiesner. So this book won the Caldecott Medal Award for its illustrations, and because it's incredibly creative. The story starts out like how the Three Little Pigs start, right? It starts off with the story. The text is very normal. It's all 2D cartoon, with the wolf looking over the pigs. And it even starts off on our second page with the wolf coming in, saying, I'm gonna, little pig, let me come in, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin. Then the wolf says, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. So in this story, when the wolf huffs and puffs and blows the house in, he knocks the first pig out of the story. So as you can see, the pig now is looking more three-dimensional. The story, and even has like a comic book talk bubble. He's like, hey, he blew me right out of the story. And then on our next panel, it says at the top, and ate the pig up. So the story is continuing, but as you can tell, the picture is not. It's totally different. It doesn't match up with what the words say. And the wolf is incredibly confused. So then our next pig starts off. And very similar, starting off the correct way. But as you can see in our next panels, things start to change. Our pig that escaped, he is saying, hey, come on, it's safe out here. So our second pig leaves, but the story at the top of the panels is still going as if it was correct. But our wolf is perplexed. He's like, where the heck are these pigs going? So then by the time we get to our third pig, which we think we know how the story goes, all the panels start to get disheveled, right? The pigs are all out of the story now, and even the wolf is looking very scared. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm moving around, this is very weird, and all of a sudden all the panels are gone. So the story does continue to keep happening, but, but they're all kind of thrown all over the place. So the pig's like, hey, let's explore this place a little bit. Make a little paper airplane, and off they go. And as they travel through, they eventually find themselves inside of different folk tales and fairy tales and little riddles. So we have Hey Diddle Diddle that they fall into. You can see even they're kind of like drawn in the same way that these characters would be in. But then eventually they say, hey, we got to get out of here. And then they keep traveling through and they find the Prince and the Dragon. And I like this because it's very just black and white. But again, the pigs are there saying like, what's going on here? And then you can even see, very similar to what has been happening with these storyboards and these panels, the storyline continues. And the storyline even continues on this page, but the characters are not acting the way that the story is telling them to. And our dragon is now colorful, and he's out of the story. So this fun little tale of the three pigs, the pigs get to go into different types of fairy tales and check them all out. It's very creative. It's a creative take. When I had originally heard of this story and the thoughts about like the plot, I definitely had different thoughts on where the story would go compared to where it does go. But it's still a great story. It's still very creative, obviously. I thought actually that there would be more fairy tales that the characters would go into. Like it would have been cool to see like Snow White, Cinderella, things like that. But you only get the two, which is still good, but I kind of wish it had expanded a little bit more. But in the finite space it has inside of this picture book, it still does a powerful job and makes it a funny tale that definitely kids would enjoy, as would the adults that are reading it. And one final time to point this out, I really love how each character then has like a talk bubble, like a comic book, so you can follow them along, and you can teach kids how to read a comic book this way and following from left to right and top to bottom. And I think that's a really cool part of this book. Then eventually at the end, they piece it back together, but their new characters are with them. And finally, this little detail here of the dragon knocking over like half the letters. They're kind of just floating around, and then they're picking up the letters, and then finally they're piecing the letters back into the order they're supposed to be in. So I thought that was a cool little illustration and quirk to the story. Obviously, from the Russell text, folktales and folk narratives are part of our society. It's kind of ingrained into us from a very early age. We know them as children. We know the Disney versions of them, but obviously going way back to like the Tales of Mother Goose and the Brothers Grimm, they had a strong hold on how we kind of view these stories today. Interestingly, as the chapter points out, almost all these stories were originally like, just word of mouth, right? They weren't written down for the longest time. They were just kind of constructed by what the social mores of the time were and how people felt at the time. So I think it's cool now that we're still having stories from 300 or 400 years ago as part of our pop culture being remade and different types of movies and stories. And eventually, because there's been these tropes that so often, you get stories that kind of flip the narrative on its head. And you've seen that with a lot of movies too. This book was made in 2001, so around the time when Shrek was coming out, right? So Shrek obviously flips everything on its head about what we think of fairy tales and folk tales. And this story kind of is a continuation of that in a way. So yeah, that's what I got today. The chapter was really interesting. Talked about a bunch of different types of folk tales and narratives, from like tall tales and local legends, to even like ghost stories. I think those are awesome too, like scary stories to tell in the dark. I was a big fan growing up with those. So yeah, all these types of tales bring people together, make people want to read, and have really cemented themselves into literature and what we have today. So thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you back here next time.